Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to promote a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. Today, I'm joined by Natalie Menten. Natalie is a liberty leader with a wealth of knowledge and experience. She served for 8 years on the RTD board and is one of the strongest defenders of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in our state. Natalie is here to discuss one of the most egregious attacks on private property that Colorado has seen in recent memory. Well, Natalie, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me here. Glad to talk about this issue with you, although it is quite alarming to see what's going on with some bills coming up.
Well, Natalie, there are many bad bills going through the state legislature this year, but what can you tell us about the housing and rental bills that the legislature is considering?
Well, I'll tell you, start with a few of them, but I think there's probably a few that won't even go into. So just kind of going over some of the more major ones. To start with, briefly cover some of the things that have to do with tenant or rental properties out there and the bills that are being run through. As one example, we've got things that fall on more of a minor end, but then some that are going to go to an extreme alarm level. And the first one I'll cover is covering pet deposits. And for anybody who's had pets, just pets, all right, they put wear and tear on a property. So it's common for when people rent a property that if you have a pet, especially well certain types of pets, I don't probably think it applies to turtles, but dogs and cats, it's fairly common to have a pet deposit. So if there's hardwood floors, there's any staining, there's a dog who may get separation anxiety and decides to destroy some trim molding and a door and some trim around the door itself. There are deposits to cover those kind of instances. And for anybody who's owned pets, and I love dogs, I do know, they do create some wear and tear in the house. Well, there's a bill that would prohibit this. That's going on kind of a lower end of, like I say, of the scale of the problems with some of these bills. But jumping from further on, there's a bill 23-184, which has to do with tenant screening. And what that bill would do is prohibit a landlord from checking into prospective tenants' rental history, including income and the other supporting documentation that gives that property owner the ability to be able to gauge whether they are going into a contract with a responsible renter or not. And by prohibiting those kind of things, you're really taking away choice from a property owner to be able to cover their costs and the necessary things to bring in a good tenant that they're able to keep. And not only is that an effect on just that single relationship, but when you do have tenants that don't follow their rules, the guidelines, like the others within the building, it creates problems for other tenants when you're not able to screen and do these things. Because again, this goes to being able to check on the tenant's history. I mean, did they leave a place trashed? Or how did they, were they running some kind of an operation there that perhaps they shouldn't have been? Things like that. When you prohibit that, that's very harmful to a property owner. Moving on to another bill that is on the radar and still has legs to make movement forward is the rent control bill. Now, the rent control bill has given us is limiting a landlord's ability to raise rent. And it doesn't take into consideration some factors that you can see when you have, for instance, you have somebody at a very low amount and you've had them there for years. But then you finally say, okay, no, we've been putting off this rent increase, but we have to make up for all of these years. I mean, property taxes continue to grow, utility bills grow, and in some rental utilities are included. There's a lot of factors that aren't included in there. This is capping the amount that you could put on rent. Again, taking away the ability for someone to be able to protect themselves and their investment. And frankly, I have enough experience in that industry with housing to know that there are many landlords that are very justified in whatever the increases that they do present, whether that may be 3%, 5%. And if you look at the rate of inflation right now, certainly well above those figures. So we've got that proposed bill also coming before the Senate Local Government Committee. And the one I mentioned before is also going before that. So, but that's where the hub of this action is going to take place with these bills I'm describing, is the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee.
So, wow. I mean, just those three bills alone, to think about it, say you're a rental owner, you own some property. Well, you can't say you can't restrict people from having pets that could destroy the property. Can't look into the background and the history of the people you're renting it to. And then you can't charge them what you need to in order to make it worth your while to even run these rental properties. So, I mean, who would want to? I mean, what business owner in their right mind would really think it's a good idea to create a rental property in Colorado if these three bills pass?
I especially think it'll drive out mom and pops. I think the big industry will have enough lawyers and things and to fight around some of this stuff. And that's what some of these people have the biggest argument is that out of state conglomerates or industry or business are coming in and taking this stuff. Well, when you make it more difficult for a mom and pop who have 3, 4 rentals, and that's their retirement income to be able to protect themselves, they're just going to get out and say, you know what, I'll go deal with some other type of passive investment because this is what I've planned for. And now the government is just stomping on me in legislation that is really poorly thought out. And then going on, there's more. We've got, and I think you've done already a podcast on this one, so people can reference back to that with Polis having a land use policy that, they like to use local control when it works for them, but when it doesn't, we'll just take away the local control. So what it's saying in this bill, 23-213, is that even if you have a local government like City of Lakewood, where I'm at, the voters put in a cap on growth. I believe Boulder's got some restrictions. Golden's got some restrictions. What Polis's bill is saying is local governments won't get, or local voters. Sorry, you made a choice, but gone, forget about it. This is a statewide concern. So whatever decision you made is overridden by going to be what, Senate Bill 213, if that goes through. And you could probably talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, they just want to cram in high density housing into these areas that don't want it. I mean, it's unbelievable that these local city governments should know better for their community than the state government, of course, right? And of course, the voters make these decisions to decide what they want allowed in their community or not. I mean, that's their way of life. That's why they moved to a place like Golden, for example, to kind of be near Metro Denver, but not the big city feel of Denver or Lakewood, for example. You're close to the mountains, kind of quiet nights. But Polis wants to come in and say, no, this is for the greater good, comrade. We got to put in high density housing in your community, and tough if you don't like it. We don't care what your local city council says. We don't care what your local planning commission say. We don't care what your local voters say. We think this is necessary. I mean, it's a total takeover of these local municipalities by the state. It's absolutely and utterly egregious.
Well, and that's one of the discussions that really, unless you're a local government and you're watching the zoning issues going through, which are the most contentious of anything that'll go through a local government. If there's any meeting you're to stay till 1 a.m, it'll be a zoning issue. Okay. So right now what's occurring is in Lakewood, I keep referring to Lakewood, but it's going on in other cities too, is about the accessory dwelling units. Wheat Ridge has an interesting case that was just brought to my attention. They asked for help, so I'm going to give a plug to them here because I'm so short on time that I just can't give much. But Wheat Ridge last year passed accessory dwelling units being added into code, giving you that ability. There's a group of citizens that disagree with the wording and how it was presented, and I can see a couple issues with how it was worded. Gray areas that really should have been addressed. Their main argument, though, was that it should, and you go out and get signatures and stop what a government approved and put it to the voters. It's called a referendum. So they went to go out, get signatures in Wheat Ridge to do a referendum and actually put this matter up for vote to the voters. Guess what city council said or no? Well, the city clerk over there has stated they have insufficient signatures to get it on the ballot. They have given, supposedly, the clerk this list of all the registered voters, and the clerk has still denied them the right to put it on the ballot. So I won't go into that much more, but if somebody's weird, look it up. You probably might be already aware of this. But the ADU discussion is occurring, and it's that density. Where are we going to fit this stuff in that people want? And oh, by the way, where are we talking about water in any of this discussion with Colorado? You know, aren't we queen of the plains desert, something along that line? Anyway, on to the ADUs, wrapping this back to Senate Bill 23-213, which you had done that podcast already on, so somebody can watch that, is that I think what I read briefly from your, thanks to you, putting it out, was that it would authorize up to 6 ADU units on a residential property. Now, personally, I really do support property rights. But I can just tell you, if I talk to neighbors and I said, the state says they want to approve putting 6 ADUs on residential properties, like all of them or whatever, something to that level, there's going to be people who are going to be really, really upset. Because then you're going to tie it into one more thing. Sorry, I'm getting way off track here, I know. This also ties into the whole short-term rental discussion that's occurring within municipalities. Because once you build those ADUs, you then open it up to the short-term rentals. Now you want to talk about neighbors who will get really upset about stuff when they have 6 ADUs potentially. I mean, I'm taking to the max numbers, I'm guessing, and I haven't dug in this total depth. But 6 ADUs, and let's say 3 of them could be short-term rentals, you know people are going to be freaking out over this. But it all boils down to they're trying to jam this housing in. We haven't had the real core discussion, which is number one, where's the water going to come from? And nobody's talking about that. So now I can move on to the thing we're going to go in depth and talk about the really horrible bill. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. This one is, I just wrote an op-ed. I hope the Denver Post will print it, but I actually called for a recall on any legislator who votes for this thing. It is horrible, horrible, horrible. This is House Bill 1190, called Affordable Housing First Right of Refusal. What it essentially says is that if you have a qualifying property, which is defined as a property within the urban area, 5 or more units, or in rural, 3 or more units, you as a property owner, when you go to sell this, you have to give 14-day notice to the government that you're going to sell it. They get the first right to initiate purchase. Doesn't guarantee anything, but they're staking a claim saying we're going to get first right to buy the property. So this is a local government, like a city, a town, or a county. The property owner, so when they say, okay, hubby, let's sell the property. First thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to, within 14 days, let the local governments know that you're selling the property with intent. That's called a triggering event. That might mean that you contacted real estate agent, said, I want to list this. That's your triggering event. You got 14 days now. There's some other qualifications or types of triggering events. If you list it on Craigslist, or you put a for sale sign in your front yard, or you talk, somebody could, trial lawyers are going to have a fun day with this one. As soon as you have that triggering event, you give the notice to the government. They got 14 days to respond whether they're interested or not. If they are interested, then they have 60 days. Again, they're the only player in this game right now. Okay, other buyers, forget about it, really. You got 60 days where the government is going to come back to make an offer. And in that original notice you gave them, in the 14-day, you had said, basically, here's the price, here's the terms. So this is where it's really not clear within the bill, the mechanics of how that'll work, because you haven't gotten bids from other people. So how can you figure out what is an economically fair, there's a word for it they've got in the bill, comparable bid? You haven't really gotten another bid, but the government gets to bid off what you told them in 14 days. But 14 days where you've given them notice, 60 days where they have the right to come back with an offer. Then they have 120 days to do the financing, get the inspections done, and do what's necessary to close. By the time you add in the 14 days, the 60-day period, the 120-day period, you are now at over 200 days where you as a property owner are tied up without really any guarantee that the deal is going to go through. What if the financing fell through on, let's say, day 180? You've now been tied up for 6 months. The entire market can change. On top of that, the government, you as a property owner are prohibited from working with a third party in any type of a deal that would make it cost prohibitive for the government to buy it. So you've essentially put a cap on the property. So we talked earlier about a rent on property rental. This bill, 1190, is putting a cap on any of these qualifying properties where the government's interested, a cap on the sales amount if it makes it cost prohibitive for the government. The bill, I mean, I'm trying to find my notes. There's even more things that are wrong with this thing. Do you have any questions? You look like you want to ask something.
No, I mean it's just egregious. It's hard to even wrap my head around the idea that the legislators in our state capital think that this is a good idea. That, I mean, it makes sense that they want to take housing away from the private market. They want to take housing away from private property owners to turn it into government housing. I mean, it's just a Soviet style type of scheme. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And thinking about the financing, thinking about this idea that, 6 months down the line, your property's tied up. Most people don't most people don't have that kind of time just to sit on a property on the market, especially in Colorado's hot real estate market, just to have something sitting there waiting for these bureaucrats to file and shuffle paperwork to decide what they're going to do, how much they're going to offer you, and how little control you would have as a property owner over what these governments want to do to your property. I mean, to your investment.
There are multiple articles out there about this bill, 1190, and how horrible it is. And plenty of lobbyists lined up on both sides. But Joshua Sharf did hit on he had done a piece on it. And there was a good mention of a part of the problem that hadn't been brought up by others, and that is with the tax rules that are out there. You have a certain amount of time that if you're going to sell a property to be able to deal with the tax issues that you got to deal with when you're dealing in capital gains. And there's problems there associated with this because there's most people, when you're in the midst of selling something, a lot of people selling something, you're looking at something else to buy. When you're held on that one process by government, and I should mention another factor, and it's called the I'm sorry, there's another it's called tolling of periods. That's the name, sorry. There's a clause in 1190 that I mentioned. First of all, it could be tied up for over 200 days, but there's a clause about tolling of periods. What that says is if there is a delay that the government has no control over, it can go beyond 208 days. When you factor that in and how possible it is that the government could claim a delay because of factors outside of their control, I'm sure that you could imagine that could easily go longer. And it's one thing to think about the legislature that's down there, some legislators, some politicians being in favor of this, because frankly, some of them have no business being down at the state capitol. None of them. I mean, some of them, no business whatsoever. They should stay home. But there are lobbyists down there. And I want to bring this up because this is where you and I are actually part of our tax money. Part of our tax money is going to support this bill. The list of lobbyists, and you can, for people who are watching this, if you don't know how to figure out how to look up what lobbyists are opposing or supporting or monitoring a bill, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and go under, it's under, well, just search lobbyists and you'll find it. And you can search by a bill number. And so if you just plug in House Bill 23-1190, you're going to find a list of organizations, long list, supporting and opposing this. So back to our tax dollars. Here's a sample list of public entities using public money to pay a lobbyist to go down to the Capitol, talk to legislators, and push them and cajole them and sweeten them up to pass House Bill 1190. We've got the Colorado Municipal League to start with. Why am I offended by this? To start with, my city of Lakewood, we pay $90,000 a year. I'm sorry, I'm getting upset. $90,000 a year in taxpayer money in dues to Colorado Municipal League each year. Colorado Municipal League is down there pushing passage of this bill. If I live in Adams County people should know their Board of County Commissioners is paying a lobbyist in one way or another, whether it's staff member or a private organization, paying money to somebody to push this bill and passage of it. Arapahoe County, your county commissioners apparently support this bill. They have a lobbyist supporting it. City and County of Broomfield. Moving on to some private organizations. This Colorado Center of Law and Policy. The counties and commissioners acting together, which is a version of Colorado counties, but it's the, I'd call it more like the statist version of it down there. We've got Elevation Community Land Trust supporting this. Look up their ties and you'll get some really weird spider web ties thing going on. The League of Women Voters. If there's a number one reason to ever support the League of Women Voters or to get on their board and overturn them, it would be an example like this. They are promoting absolute property theft with House Bill 1190. And that's the League of Women Voters who wants to earn trust from voters and guide them on any decision matter at the ballot box. Forget it. Never trust the League of Women Voters. I know I'm ranting now. I'm really going off. I'm enjoying this in one way. Now let's talk about lobbyists who are opposing 1190. We've got Colorado Competitive Council, Colorado Farm Bureau, City of Colorado Springs, Colorado Bar Association. Surprised because they're going to make a lot of money off some of these things in the legislation that's because these bills are so poorly written. Colorado Concerned Business Organization, Denver Metro Chamber, Downtown Denver Partnership, El Paso County. So I applaud the government bodies that are down there opposing this. The bill is terrible. I think I've probably missed something, but I described it as much as we can probably take because we've got to talk about some other bad things that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I mean, it is absolutely insulting to us as taxpayers, as people who are working so hard, so many people on fixed incomes, people, just trying to get by. And we're forced to pay these taxes, under threat of law. If we don't pay them, we know what happens then. We have to pay these taxes to our local governments, and then they go around, pay these lobbyists to figure out more ways to steal property from people in our community to make it more difficult for rentals to exist. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's par for the course. Unfortunately, this is the nature of government in so many ways, is this idea of just, usurping the market, usurping the community, and trying to basically, force their utopian vision on society. If only they could have enough government housing, it would solve all of the problems, forget about all the private property owners and the service they're providing to the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this for anybody watching, what can you do about these things? We'll show up before your city council under just public comment and bring it to their attention. Let's just be good and assume that they don't know that this is going on. Probably many of them don't, but put them on the spot and say, you know what? I want you guys to stop paying. If you pay dues, my money to CML, I want you to tell them to pull support for this bill and go to an opposed stance. And if you're not going to do that, then do not cut another check to CML for my tax money.
Great. Yeah, show up at your city council meeting and run for
Or
city
run for
council too for
office. There
anybody.
you go.
Yeah, run for office. You know, city council is one of the most accessible seats in the state, really, and you can have a huge impact and prevent some of these bills from going through. And especially, you know, say 1190 does pass, some version of it passes. I mean, it's really about these local governments having this ability to take this private property away, get this right of first refusal to buy it. Buy, I use in quotes because they're really going to determine on their own how much it's worth. So really steal it from the property owners. But hey, if that city council is made up of liberty-minded individuals, people who believe in private property and respect the rights of the individual, then you know they could say, well, we're not gonna go along with this 1190 bill. We're not gonna buy anybody's property here at the local level. So it's more important than ever to get involved in our local governments. I think that's where people can have the biggest impact.
Yes, I agree. And petition period is opening up for the city council races. Of course, Denver's going on, so everybody's focused on that. But upcoming special districts in May, and then city municipal elections in November. And the petition period is July and August. It's not even that hard to go out and get the
All right.
signatures.
Oh
Not
yeah,
that many.
I have a couple friends running for city council in Arvada this year, and I was looking it up, and they need 25 signatures. 25 signatures of people who live in the district. I mean, that's about as easy as it gets, folks, you know.
City council, there's mayor positions, and the more choices the voters can, have. I mean, there's many of these races that go uncontested. Sadly, City of Golden, I've seen it way too many years. Lakewood, there's anyway, stop there. But so now we talked about what's going on through the legislature. But as you may know, I keep an eye on the title board. And that's something I want to go into real quick. So for many people, they may not be aware of the process, how things end up on the ballot. Well, sometimes a governing body will refer things to the ballot, but other times citizens will go through a petition process, which is not easy, but you have a certain issue you're going to bring forward. You're going to actually go out and get signatures, get it on the ballot. Well, there's something brewing at a statewide level that I'm very opposed to. It's initiative number 3, and it is has to do with, again, housing. And what this bill will do is it will charge a fee on any property transfer, except for a couple exclusions. So, like, you've got a husband and wife, they got married, and there's going to be will it be a marriage or something occurring within their relationship, and the deed is going to change. On a transaction like that, it would not apply. But for most transactions where you have a sale, there would be a fee assessed on it, 0.1% on the property sale value. The proponents, which are odd in itself, it's a couple lawyers from a bond law firm who happens to do a lot of business with governments, are the two proponents. This measure proposes to take, again, 0.1% of a property sale minus the first $200,000. So if you've got $1 million property, it would be this fee on $800,000 of it. The first 200,000 is excluded. They are claiming, the proponents here, the petition proponents, that this is a fee so that they can skirt the taxpayer's Bill of Rights. Because the taxpayer's Bill of Rights, and I'm just getting the actual language right in front of me, clearly prohibits any tax on a property transfer in Section 8A. It's very clearly defined in 2 parts there, that you can't tax property sales. So what the proponents are trying to do is get around it by saying it's not a tax, it's a fee. You'll pay this amount when you go, the buyer will actually pay it, and they will pay it when they go to record the deed. Well, where's this money going to go to? This is also going to what they call now attainable housing. So you may have heard of affordable housing. Affordable housing is usually 80% or below AMI. That's the area median income, meaning what's the average income. This bill takes it to the middle level. So instead of on that lower income level, this instead is people who are earning income, and I have to quote this just a moment here while I get it up because it's important. Roughly between $65,000 a year and $100,000 a year is where this subsidized housing would be, the income level that the subsidized housing would be available for. So let me go back and describe this in a big picture. This is a citizen initiative being run by two lawyers who happen to be bond lawyers dealing with government quite a lot. They are trying to run a citizen initiative, which they would go out and get signatures for to put it on this year's ballot. What this would do when if it's passed by the voters, God hope it isn't, would create a fee the buyer would pay as soon as they go to record the deed for a property that they bought. The fee that they're paying now, which is prohibited under Tabor, would be assessed on the property, paid to the clerk. The clerk would pass it on to the state of Colorado. It would go into a new fund for attainable housing for people who are earning between roughly 65,000, a single person, by the way, earning between $65,000 to nearly $100,000 a year, would be able to get this subsidized housing, all courtesy of the buyer who bought the property and is now responsible for somehow providing attainable housing within that income tax range that I just gave you. So that is over here, and they're kind of, I think, keeping on a back burner. They'll need paid circulators to circulate this. One of the things to keep an eye out when you're trying to keep these on your radar is, has any paid circulation company filed that they're going to hit the street to go get the signatures, because you have to do that. No petition company has yet filed to do that. I think what they might be waiting to do is run a last minute bill through the state legislature. They could refer this measure, or they could pass this measure actually if they wanted. Since we tried to actually challenge this on the fact they're calling it a fee and trying to skirt Tabor. And what the Supreme Court roughly a month ago said was basically no comment. We're going to just affirm what the title board said, let it go hit the street. If it passes, then you can go challenge it on legal grounds that it's violating Tabor. So what may be happening right now is that these two lawyers with somebody in the background, because there's some big org working on the back end, that's why they're using the lawyers as the front men for it, to run it, is trying to get the state legislature to either pass it, assuming they can get away with calling it a fee. Why would they even have to go to the voter, right? Or if they should refer to the ballot and maybe reduce that challenge. Don't know. But that is a big worry, because if these two lawyers who happen to work for Butler and Snow, and anybody can look them up and just search government bonds, government housing, Butler and Snow, Denver, Colorado, you're going to see how much the strong ties this law firm has with government bodies. You got that in the works. Okay, so I don't know, you have any questions about that one?
So just so I make sure I understand it clearly. So basically, yeah, they're going to tax. I mean, in reality, it's a tax on every property sale in the state of Colorado, with few exceptions, and then put that money into a special fund that's going to be used to help subsidize housing for people making a pretty decent living, or at least it used to be,
I know.
65 grand, 100 grand a year nearly. I mean, it's the people, I mean, yeah, it's crazy, and I can see why the benefit to these lawyers, how much money they can possibly make off of it. And of course, it's another housing scheme. I mean, it kind of makes me think, it's a shark who smells blood in the water, right? They say, okay, here we go. There's this housing crisis. There's this a huge amount of housing bills. Everybody's looking for a solution. There's these radical, out of control Democrats controlling the state government, and they're willing to go along with pretty much any of these schemes. So these lawyers come along, hey, funded by somebody. hey, here's our opportunity, here's our chance. This is my take on it, right? My opinion. Here's our chance to go ahead and put this new policy into place that we're going to benefit tremendously from. Whether it helps people or not, who cares, but we're going to make out like bandits. And that's kind of what it seems to me, at least.
Well, we're going to put so much regulation on them and tie their hands. We can't check on tenant history. You can't take a pet deposit. And the property owner's like, screw this, I'm out of here. The government's like, sweet, you putting it up for sale, great, we get first right of refusal on it too, and we get to put a
Right.
property cap on it. I mean, this is like government. I mean, talk about, is it central planning or like, I mean,
It's a state takeover of the housing market. I mean, that's
yeah.
what these bills all boil down to, is this idea that the state's going to come in and basically just create a state-run housing system in the state of Colorado. It's absolutely unbelievable. Like you said, yeah, they're making it extremely difficult for renters, for rentals, push those people out, buy the properties up, and then here's our schemes, here's our, big concrete block buildings with high density, and in the middle of everywhere. And we'll see how that works out. I mean, I don't know who would want to live in a place like that, really.
So then it wraps into going backwards a little bit, and I'm sorry, I'm just leading into this, but last year we had Proposition 123, and um, I I know there was a lot of people fighting against that, and what that was, state was taking state income tax that normally would go into the general fund, and in upcoming years be refunded, because we have so much revenue going to the state right now that just they're drowning in dollars down there. Well, some of that's got to come back to us in refunds, and they hate that. So they ran Prop 123, which takes part of our upcoming Tabor refunds or money out of the general fund and puts it into this new fund called State Income Dedicated State Income Tax to Affordable Housing. And the effects of that are that in the years, and it passed by, the voters passed it, local governments, to be able to get part of this funding put in this new subsidized housing fund, have to increase subsidized housing by 3% per year, each year, over a 3-year period. So right now at a local government level, Department of Local Affairs, which is we're special districts. It's the government hub for special districts, cities, municipalities, pretty much everything except the state. Counties and schools, you can get a ton of info at DOLA. That's the acronym, Department of Local Affairs. DOLA is doing training and workshops with local governments on how they're going to comply with the effects of Prop 123, because it required 3% more over a baseline, 3% more subsidized housing, I should say, over a set baseline. Well, the kind of the mystery when the bill passed, nobody really knew how to do this. So that's why they're doing workshops now, is how do you figure out that baseline? How many more subsidized, government subsidized units do we need to add to be able to get the money from that Prop 123 money? So I'm going to do a screen share. And, well, first, before I do the screen share, there were, I remember I did a debate with, as part of the Tabor Foundation. I'm on board director with Tabor Foundation. And we as an organization were officially opposing Prop 123. So we got called to debates. And one of the debates was Aaron Harbor Show on Channel 12, and which is still available if anybody wants to reference and look it up. But one of the concerns we talked about was the government takeover and where were they going to fit this subsidized housing in? And we've got municipalities that are landlocked. And where you can, you have to add with Prop 123, government subsidized housing. Well, it has to come from somewhere. You're either going to build up, can't build out, you're going to build up. So let's say you've got 3 levels subsidized housing unit. You're going to double that, make it 6, or you're going to find properties that are not in subsidized market right now. The government will buy those and convert them. How are you still going to get the amount of housing you need? Because this is pretty extreme. Well, again, unfortunately, voters passed it. So now is the missing piece where we figure out what are the numbers going to be to be able to get that funding, and what does this look like on a city level. And so I've got this spreadsheet, I'm sorry, it's in a PDF, that will show some example cities, at least on the Denver Metro, the West area. I grabbed a few different examples that are local to me. And what you're going to see is, so I can explain it before we get there, a couple methods. And what Dole is telling these governments is you have a choice to make, and you can use different baselines. So let me go to Screenshare here. See if I can get that up for you. And you can probably see that now.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So here at the top, I did my home city, city of Lakewood. And to start with, over here on the left, we've got this ACS and CHAS. That's the source data, let's say, is coming from two different places. Either the American Community Survey, that's a survey we get, some people do it, others like me totally ignore it, that wants you to give somewhat personal information out. And then this other variation, which is Housing of Urban Development, that's the HUD. And then here it's talking about income limits. What it's trying to determine is, with Prop 123, it was tied to area median income and then how many housing units you had for a baseline. So that's these columns here. Don't need to worry too much about it, except that what it's saying is you've got choices, and depending on the baseline you're going to use, here in this column is a 3-year commitment on how many subsidized units you have to add on, or broken down to the annual basis. So City of Lakewood, who put in a growth limit, has an option of choosing options between roughly a couple hundred, I think that's the lowest there, up to potentially several hundred more subsidized housing units within a 1-year period. I did Jefferson County down here. Well, let me skip because it's easier. Let's get to, here's another county. Sorry, I'm trying to see it behind the screen. Arvada is an example. Within a 3-year period, that's either a couple hundred all the way up to several hundred again of these units. So this is even outside of the bills going through the Capitol, outside of Initiative 3. This is what now voters have passed, but we're seeing the effects of it. And we're seeing a massive amount from, like building, where if we've got estimated, say 25% of the market right now in government hands, so meaning it's government controlled, but it's taxpayer funded, how much are we going to be increasing what's a somewhat of a lower double digit into a mid, or, are we approaching 30, 40, 50% of the housing market going to go to the government? I don't know if I'm overblowing numbers or not. We need a warehouse to put all of these different factors together and try to look into a crystal ball and figure out what the heck the government is doing. You think of it this way: government subsidized housing. Here's something else I hadn't even thought of. All this government subsidized housing doesn't even pay property taxes. So all of these services that have to be supported means that everybody who actually owns the property and pays property taxes, your overhead is basically increasing. Your property taxes are going to probably go up because you're funding more of it, because the house down the street that's subsidized isn't, if it's government owned. Okay.
Wow.
What are your thoughts on all that?
It's a 3-year plan. It just reminds me of the Soviet Union again. You have to have this, follow this strict 3-year plan. And if you create this subsidized housing, this affordable housing, then of course, then you get the money from the state, from the taxpayers, a little bit more sent your way. So you can continue this scheme. So you can continue turning your entire city into government housing. That's where it's going. I don't think it's a hyperbole to say that this is where it's going, where you have every high density or every like multifamily unit controlled by the government or controlled by some government entity, or at least subsidized by it at some point here, the way all these schemes keep working.
Yeah, and there's something else I forgot to mention about 1190. This jumps back to that first right of first refusal. Is that because there's a lot of people, unless it's in their backyard, in their front yard, if it's really affecting them in their living room, they don't. They just don't have the bandwidth for it. But people who are tenants should be very worried about House Bill 1190. Again, that's government for affordable housing, first right of refusal, where the government gets to come in and have first right to buy a property that could have a price cap on it. If you're a tenant in one of those multi-unit buildings that qualifies for this bill, once the government takes it over, if you make too much, see you later, bye. The bill says you don't get a renewal on that lease. So for those people who think government's not encroaching on the rights, the liberties, the freedom, the ability to support yourself, to be self-sustaining. If you think it's only property owners out there, those people are mistaken if they think that. Like I described, your property taxes, if you're shouldering more, if you're a tenant and you're now going to be in a unit where you get this letter from your new landlord, the government, that says, sorry, we reviewed your income statement and you make too much. See you later.
Wow. And of course, the government will be able to ask for your income and all of your history and all of your background, where a private
Well,
property owner
they,
renting out probably can't ask for that, any of it, right?
they can't, right? The government can look at, but under, let's see, which one was that? 23 184, you as a private property owner, you don't get a look into that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only, and it's not necessarily an optimistic viewpoint, but I guess the only one of the thoughts I have that makes me a little bit hopeful is that I know that socialist schemes fail. The government is terrible at central planning. They're not entrepreneurs, they're not business owners, they're bureaucrats shuffling paperwork. And these schemes are going to fail. The politicians can dream up all these fantasies, they can write all these fancy laws, they can do all of these put all of these ideas on paper and push them out there and force the community at gunpoint, literally, to go along with their schemes, but it's not going to work. I mean, it's not going to create a better housing situation for the people. It's only going to impoverish the community. It's going to make things harder for people, especially people like you said who want to be self-sufficient, who want to maybe, find an opportunity to improve their circumstances in life. Maybe they're on that margin where they're about to reach a kind of a new I don't know, tax bracket or a new level of their income. And they say, oh, if I can skirt this and do this, having that flexibility and that individual capability to kind of manage their own life in order to achieve their goals and dreams. I mean, the government squashes all of that through all of these schemes. So, I mean, I know they're going to fail eventually in terms of achieving their set goals, but of course, the success these programs are going to have is to make people worse off and to make the housing situation worse and to subsidize things that they don't necessarily want to.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Um, it's very. I hope you're right. Let me just go that way. I'm pretty concerned. I mean, I'm noticing here on this, just with thinking back to Prop 123 and thinking that that couldn't pass. Really, I mean, people would see the light and see how many the after effects of what it would have on communities. Like I say, I mean, you look at city council meetings and with zoning and density, those things bring up very passionate people or groups that again go to midnight, 1 in the morning, with people opposing these things and what we've got going on now, but they continue to not be aware. So I hope we can get out the word on some of this, stop some of this, or if, as you state, things will eventually crumble and fail. But it's pretty scary where things are moving right now. I can't
Oh,
believe
yeah.
that some of these bills made it past the House. I would have thought they would have failed before then. And I know others feel the same way when you bring the status up to them. They're like, how could even get this farce
Right.
right now?
Right. Brave new world that we're in here with these, actual socialists serving the state legislature, actual members of the Democratic Socialists of America. That's not outrageous to say. It's actual reality. And some of these other legislators, like you said, have no business being there. They have no concept of the harm they're going to cause to the communities and to the businesses and to the people who've lived there their whole lives through all these schemes they're trying to push. So I'm not really hopeful in terms of the consequences of this. I guess one way to put it is, I know it's going to fail. And unfortunately, it's going to create a worse situation off for everybody in the communities. We're going to have a squalor, a bad place. It's going to be a bad place where culture is destroyed, communities destroyed, and people who have been there forever pushed out to make way for these new government schemes. So I'm fearful of it. I don't think it's a good thing, but it's just the reality that their schemes are not going to accomplish what they want them to.
I hope that's made me think as you were talking. There's another thing that's tied into this, and I don't know how many other cities this is going on in. But city of Lakewood right now is looking at, they're going to have a study session on it here within a couple of weeks, maybe one, actually next Monday. It's called the distressed properties measure they're looking at. And there's some frightening stuff in there. One of them is that if there is a vacant property, meaning, and they've got it laid out where like a code officer doesn't see there's any furniture in the house, if there's unusual utilities use, meaning utilities are not being used, that can be considered a vacant, unused property. And they are looking at different options on potential ways to encourage that property to be sold. That might mean in the government world, they put it with carrot and a whip. We're going to give them some methods that appear to be a carrot and see if we can motivate them to not have a vacant property any longer. And some methods within proposed ordinances that would be called the whip, meaning the horse didn't take the carrot, and the government will now use the whip to get done what it needs to do. So just again, all of these, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, putting all of these things together. And even if it does fail, what's going to be the damage by the time we learn the lesson?
Right.
Government's all of a sudden the owner of how many more properties that when it can't even claims it can't even take care of what it's supposed to be doing now. And many people might agree with that. Now it's going to take on more. It's total mission creep, property theft. Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, scary stuff, Natalie. I mean, but it is important to talk about. This can't be ignored. People do need to wake up and really realize what's going on, especially property owners, people who are involved in property business. If you own multi-family, multi-unit properties or are involved in any way, I mean, this is something that you need to pay attention to. This is something we need to try and stop. And like you said, whether it's recall or defeating these politicians in the next election, all these politicians are pushing these schemes. I mean, it is socialism. I mean, this is a socialist schemes. They need to be kicked out of office. They need to be held accountable for their policies and the destruction they're bringing upon the community. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to: is good people standing up, speaking out, doing what you're doing, and getting good people in there to replace these bad politicians. I mean, ultimately, that's what needs to be done.
I certainly, when we're talking about proper, there have been some recalls in the past, recall attempts, where you got to kind of look at it and you go, there is certain guidelines on what you justify a recall, right? We do want to make something that's legit, but when it's outright property theft, um, I can't see it. I can't. It's hard to find a reason that would be more justified.
Right.
And will there be the power to do it? I'm not even saying, I'm not claiming I'm going to take on a recall effort, but it should, that's what should happen for anybody who votes for some of these measures. It's
Yeah.
absolutely disgusting.
Property is the foundation of our civilization, really, our free market, our world we're trying to build is this idea that individuals can own their own property, own their own lives, and make their own dreams come true. And these politicians want to take that away.
Yeah.
Well,
So
Natalie, on that note, on that uplifting note, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for sharing. It is outrageous, and I think people, like you said, they don't necessarily believe that things have gotten this far, but here we are, and we got to face the facts and do something about it. So thank you.
yes, and to sum it up, we can kill some of these bills. There are big organizations, groups. When it all boils down to people, it's more some people band together a little more in certain areas than others, but that are opposing this. And I can't give a date on when some of these bills are going to be heard, but that's important for us to remember that if we want, we can show up to oppose what's probably going to be a lot of them on the same day, I'm guessing, which is the tenant screening, the pet deposits, this right of first refusal, very likely scheduled on the same day within that Senate Local Government and Housing Committee. They had it scheduled for September 11th, but it appears over the last 48 hours that has been removed, I suspect temporarily. But for anybody who wants to keep an eye on it, just go to, I think it's leg.colorado.gov. I'm going off memory because my autofill does it for me, but just go to the Senate committee calendar, and instead of scanning through all that stuff, open the PDF, do Control F, and just hit in like 1190, and you should be able to keep an eye on that. And the more of us that join in, I mean, it's great that we've got remote testimony, but honestly, when it's coming down to property theft like this, the proper procedure would be to send off a fiery letter or a thankful letter to those you might suspect are going to vote to kill it. Either way, it's always good to hear, please kill it, I know you're going to, or please vote no, I know you're going to, but also to show up in testimony that day. There are some things that's important enough to drive down to Colfax and Broadway, find some parking spot that'll allow for more than 2 hours because it's going to need it, and to walk into that Capitol through the metal detector and go up to that committee room and tell these legislators it's absolute property theft and it's not acceptable. So we're not done yet. I hope to make it down there.
Great.
Maybe we should meet up in the cafeteria. We should do that.
Definitely. We'll put some plans out. I'll keep people updated on Twitter, Facebook, on my website. And yeah, let's see if we can get a showing for support of property rights and trying to stop this theft.
That sounds good. Hopefully there's not a snowstorm that day.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie, for your time. I appreciate it, and take care.
Sure. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate your work.
Now, did you, and I can cut it there, I can edit this, but did you have anything else you wanted to say? I didn't want to cut you off if you kept going.
No, I think I gave probably too much detail and information and bad news.